Hello, 5th grade. We're on Domain 9, Chemical Matter, Lesson 4, Finding Evidence. Our objectives for today are to use information from different sources to classify objects as metal or non-metal. We're going to understand how to reduce and combine sentences, and we're going to be using a graphic organizer to summarize information from the reader. Our key vocabulary for today: classify is to arrange into categories according to definition. An element is an essential part of something. Slather is spread on thickly. Furnace is a very hot oven. A plateau is an area of high, level, no-slope ground. An atom is the basic unit of an element. The periodic table is a way of organizing chemical elements. Resonance is a quality of sound, clear, deep, long-lasting. And a conductor is a good channel for something like electricity. Okay, we're going to go ahead and independently read today. Our word work today is elementary, dear Watson. Scientific communication can be confusing because words that mean something different in everyday language have a very specific meaning in scientists. So an element can mean the basic substance that makes up all matter. Different kinds of atoms are different elements. It could also be the simplest idea or principle of something, and it could also be a small part of an electrical device containing a wire that conducts electricity. The commonality. The definitions of element relate to it being a simple part of something. Similarly, chemical elements often combine to form more complex substances. When you inhabit your role as a scientist, you have to be very careful about the definition of words you use because being precise is very important in scientific communication. This is an example of our periodic table. Now, the highlighted elements are the ones that we've noted in the chapter. So we have hydrogen, iron, gold, oxygen, and sulfur. This is where they would be found. So the H, the Fe, all of those are the element identification. So that is what we would, the short version of it. The numbers that you see, those are their atomic numbers. And obviously the under part is the name that it is. Metals versus non-metals. So what makes things a metal and what makes things a non-metal? A metal item has a resonance, so it makes a ringing sound. So if you were to hit it with something, it has a sound to it. It's malleable, which means it can be hammered into shapes. You can actually break it and make it into different shapes. It's ductile, which can be pulled into a wire and conduct electricity. They're good conductors, which means they can move electricity through, and they're often shiny. A non-metal is non-resonant. It doesn't make that ringing sound. It's also non-malleable, which it tends to break and crumble when it's hammered. It's non-ductile because it's hard to pull into a wire and conduct electricity. So this typically would not conduct electricity. They're poor conductors, which means if it was next to something that was electrical, it wouldn't move that energy through. And it's often a really dull color. Example, when you peel back the plastic, you see the shiny brown wire underneath, glistening in the light. It's amazing that something so thin makes all our lights, and the toaster, other things in the house work. Apparently, the wire is made of copper, which was discovered 11,000 years ago. I don't know why we don't make more jewelry out of it. It's so pretty. So the name of the element is copper, and the characteristics that show it's are shiny, ductile, and it's a good conductor. So, is that a metal or a non-metal? It's a metal. Let's do another one. Sulfur is not my favorite element. When it reacts, it releases a horrible rotten egg smell. As a solid, it's yellow and brittle. It doesn't make a nice sound when you hit it. In fact, it crumbles. So the name of this element is sulfur. Its characteristics are it's non-malleable and non-resonant. Remember, non-malleable means it breaks easily, and non-resonant means it doesn't make a sound. What is this one? It is a non-metal. So now we're going to talk about combining and reducing sentences. In our previous few lessons, we talked about expanding lessons, how we add more details. Now we're going to talk about combining and reducing them. When we're combining sentences, it means we have two smaller sentences that we put together to make a combined sentence. Now, this only works if it makes sense together. If we have two smaller sentences that do not correspond with each other, we wouldn't want to combine those. But if there's sentences that are similar that could add to each other, that's when we'd want to combine them. So let's do an example. The Badlands were dry, dust puffed up where they walked. In order to combine them, we would say, the Badlands were dry and dust puffed up where they walked. We were able to take away the period and add an and. Amy didn't like sleeping by the door. Snakes were nearby. B, which is the second part. Amy didn't like sleeping by the door because snakes were nearby. So now we've combined that sentence, adding the because. So we're adding that transitional word. Now we're going to talk about reducing. Sometimes there's extra words in a sentence that don't really need to be there because they don't add anything to it. So let's take a look. Amy, who was bored, wandered over to the rock, which was striped, and stared at it. Notice how there's a lot of words in there, and a lot of it is unnecessary words. So let's see how we can reduce it. Amy was bored and wandered over to stare at the striped rock. Notice how we took out a lot of those transitional words out to make it a little bit clearer and more concise. Amy liked books that involve mysteries more than romance or science or any other kind of genre. This one is a lot, because obviously we know that Amy likes mysteries, but do we need to know every single genre that she also doesn't like? No. But we can say Amy's favorite books involved mysteries. We don't have to get into the other stuff because it doesn't add anything. It actually just adds more things that we don't need. Combining puts them into a single sentence. Reading can get very boring if all the sentences are the same length, so we add additional meaning. And sometimes you want to combine and expand sentences, but sometimes you want to make them less complicated. That's when we are going to reduce those sentences. Details can also sometimes get in the way of understanding, especially with an informational text. So your assessment for today is you're going to read the sentences provided and either reduce or combine them. And that is the end of today's lesson. We will see everyone in lesson 5.